2 Kings chapter 2. Elijah has already anointed Elisha to be his successor. And when the book of Kings opens, we come across a familiar story. The moment when Elijah and Elisha will be separated. And Elijah will go home. And Elisha will pick up the work. Familiar story, but every time we approach it with a singular focus. We approach it with getting to that chariot and that whirlwind. And in doing so, we miss a whole chapter of beauty. And really, in doing so, we miss one of the more, if not the most beautiful aspect of this story. So let's go back and let's work through 2 Kings chapter 2. Now it came about afterwards. I'm back in Samuel because I've flipped over there to be funny. Came about when the Lord was about to take up Elijah by a whirlwind to heaven, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, please. The Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The sons of the prophets who were at Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that the Lord will take away your master from over you today?" He said, "Yes, I know. Be still." Elijah said to him, "Elisha, please stay here. The Lord has sent me to Jericho." He said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they came to Jericho. The sons of the prophets who were at Jericho approached Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that the Lord will take away your master from over you today?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Be still." Elijah said to him, "Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." He said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. Now 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood opposite them at a distance, while the two of them stood by the Jordan. Elijah took his mantle, folded it together, and struck the waters, and they were divided here and there. So the two of them crossed over on dry land. Now it came about when they crossed over that Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask what I shall do for you before I'm taken from you." Elisha said, "Please, let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." He said, "You've asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I'm taken from you, it shall be so for you. If not, it shall not be so." It came about as they were going along and talking that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire which separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind to heaven. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." He saw him no more. Took hold of his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. He also took up the mantle of Elijah that fell from him and returned and stood by the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that fell from him, struck the waters, said, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And when he had also struck the waters, they were divided here and there, and Elisha crossed over. 15 through 17, down through the rest of the chapter, it's an interaction with those sons of the prophets. Verses 1 through 7, notice both Elijah and Elisha know what is coming. They know that their time on earth is limited, that God is going to take Elijah. Same terminology that is used of God taking Enoch. the only two of whom it is used that way. And so they begin a journey together that reverses the course of the conquest. And in each step of this process, Elijah turns to Elisha and says, look, I'm begging you, please stay here. I need to go on. And I need to go on because God has a plan, and we can read under that and understand that He's saying, look, I do not need the emotional turmoil of having to be separated from you. And so I need you to stay here and let me go on. Elisha 3 times says, I will not leave you. It's a very powerful Hebrew word. It means to abandon. It's the idea of, I am not going to leave you to have to face this moment by yourself. I will not abandon you. I'm going to stay with you. We are human. And even though we're talking about 2 of the great figures in all of biblical history, men of tremendous spiritual maturity, no matter how advanced we are in our spiritual growth, we struggle with the thought of losing someone close to us. And so Elisha wants to be with Elijah for every last second of this journey. And Elijah is struggling with it from the mentor role. I don't want you to have to go through this. I don't want you to have to witness this. Just stay here. Elijah is to Elisha a mentor. He's the one that anointed him. He's the one that he has been following around, learning to do the work of a prophet. And he's also a father figure. Verse 12, when they're separated, Elisha cries out, Father, Father. So there's a closeness that has developed in this relationship. And Elisha is choosing, even though it's going to have this separation, even though there is some grief involved, Elisha is choosing to spend every last second he can with Elijah. He wants to be by his mentor's side. He wants every last drop of knowledge that he can get from him. He wants to be with his father figure. And so they go from Gilgal to Bethel to Jericho to the Jordan. As I said, they reverse that conquest course, and they end up standing back on the edge of Canaan's boundary. At each one of those stops, it says the sons of the prophets. Refers to the idea of a prophet school, or those younger prophets that are in training, and they're under the guidance generally of an older prophet. At each one of those stops, they too know what's going on. Elisha, do you know that God is going to take your master from you today? And in every case, Elisha says the same thing. Hush. I know that. Basically, he's telling them, step back and give us our time together. Don't interfere. I know what's happening, and I'm making the most of it. Now you step back into your place and leave this to us. In verses 7 through 12, having already been anointed as his successor, Elisha knows that it's almost time to fill Elijah's monstrous shoes as a prophet. Elijah's done powerful things. He's challenged powerful people, and he's not backed down. And so when Elijah says, you know what? I'm going to leave you with the parting gift. What can I do for you? Elisha understands that he needs as much help as possible. He's probably feeling a little bit inadequate at this point. I'm about to be the spiritual leader of Israel. I'm not going to have you as access to more knowledge or advice. And so I need the heart to carry on. I need a double portion. I need as much help as I can possibly get. It's not arrogance. It's not pride. He's not trying to supplant Elijah as a great figure in Israel's history. He just knows that the work ahead is not going to be easy. In fact, as a prophet's work, the farther they get away from the United Kingdom, the worse it gets. And the harder the work becomes. And so he's begging, I need as much help as possible. Elijah said, that's a big ask. But you know what? God will grant it. And so if you see me when this happens, when this separation takes place, you actually see it happen, you can know God's answered your request. We get to verse 11 and we're not in Kansas anymore. It's tornado time. It's whirlwind time. And very carefully, with love, I'm going to say that all the coloring sheets we've ever colored as kids are inaccurate. Elijah does not leave in a chariot. Very specifically, the text says that the chariot divides the two of them, and Elijah leaves in a whirlwind. In fact, if you go back up to verse 1, we had the foreshadowing of that exact same comment. Taken up by a whirlwind. In verse 12, Elisha witnesses it. So he knows not only has his prayer been answered, he knows that he is witnessing one of the great events in history. Only two recorded in all of time that did not die in this world, but were physically translated to the next life. And he gets to see one of them. Now notice the relationship. I said it earlier. Father, Father. That's what he is to Elisha. It's more than a prophet-to-prophet relationship. It's more than a mentor to mentee. There is a connection. Think of Paul and Timothy. Timothy, my son in the faith. That's what's going on here. And then he also cries out, the chariot of Israel, the horseman. That's what Elijah was to Israel. It's symbolic of who he is and the work he's been doing. By the way, this is beautiful. Elisha's prayed for what? A double portion of Elijah's spirit? Do you know what's said of Elisha when it's time for him to die? Father, Father, the horseman in the chariot of Israel. Same epitaph. Verse 13, after tearing his clothes, there is some sorrow involved in this. There is the human side of the connection being broken in this world. He picks up Elijah's mantle and he walks back to the Jordan. And there is confirmation that God has answered him, that truly he has taken the mantle and the role of spiritual leader of Israel because he parts the Jordan River. In verse 15, the sons of the prophets acknowledge that they've seen this, they've witnessed this. And they accept Elisha's new role. And then they beg, let us send out a search party for Elijah. And imagine Elisha's thinking, I've been through enough today. I've been separated from my master. Besides, it was a beautiful thing. He was given an honor that only one other's been given. No search party. And finally, they guilt-tripped him into saying, well, just whatever. Just leave me alone. Go look for him. And they come back and said, hey, we can't find him. He says, told you so. Told you so. Confirmation number 2 that he has stepped into this role. He's telling them in the future, you're not going to find him. 19 through 22 solidifies Elisha with the miracle. And then 23 through 25, there is some resistance. This resistance at Bethel. Bethel is ground zero of apostasy. And Elisha is being taunted. The word there indicates males anywhere from the age of 12 to 30. They're old enough to show respect for a prophet. They're old enough to show respect for the man that's been traveling with Elijah. They're old enough to show respect for God's word. And when they do not, they are mauled. The word there literally means to split. They're busted wide open. There's some different possibilities for that taunt. In reference to him being bald-headed, it could be a physical comparison with Elijah. You're no Elijah. He was a hairy man. It could be just making fun of him for being bald, or there is actually a Hebrew phrase that includes this idea that refers to him being empty-headed or being a fool. Whatever the case is, God's going to confirm him for the 4th time in just a matter of a few verses. This is my man. Now, there's a whole lot going on in this chapter. And it is beautiful. The transfer of power from one prophet to another, the acknowledgement of that transfer, God's confirmation of that transfer, and so much else. But today I want you to focus for just a second on the part that we often overlook. And it's the part that leads up to that climax, the one that we rush to at the end of the story. It is this mentor-mentee relationship prior to the departure of Elijah. It is Elisha walking beside him as close as possible to spend as much time as possible with him, even though Elijah has given him every excuse not to have to go through this. You don't have to witness this. You don't have to travel all these extra steps. Just stay. Stay with these sons of the prophets. Every city where he says this, there's those sons of the prophets. Stay with these guys who can comfort you. And Elisha says, no way. I need every last minute possible with you. I need as much knowledge as I can gain. Because he knows. He knows that the moment is coming where he'll no longer be able to go to Elijah and ask for advice. He knows that the moment is very quickly arriving when he will not have his mentor to lean on when he needs support. Without being morbid on Father's Day, we know time passes. We mark time. We keep up with the clock. I guarantee you, most of you know that it's 7 minutes to 12 and I'm still talking. We mark time. We know what's going on. Don't waste a minute of it. With your mom, with your dad, with your mentor, with your grandparents, with your children. I'll tell you too, you should have seen the look on your kids' faces the other day when they told me their grandparents were coming into town and they were getting to go to the airport. They lit up. That has to be the relationship that we've instilled in our kids for their grandkids or for their grandparents and for us. Don't wait until you know time is running out. Don't wait until you can see the end getting closer. Seize the moment now. Make the most of every moment with mom, with dad, with grandparents, with mentors, with anybody in your life, regardless your age, whether we're talking about our children or talking about my generation or older, with everybody that means something to us in this life. Because Elisha had the blessing of a warning. We don't always get the warning. If you saw the title, it asked the question, are you Elisha or are you Chris LaSalle? Chris LaSalle was a character in NCIS, New Orleans. He and his dad did not see eye to eye. Chris was in law enforcement. His dad wanted him in the oil business. And their last conversation on the phone was an argument over that difference in opinions. Well, a few days after that, LaSalle's dad tried to call him. And Chris didn't pick up because they'd been in a fight. A couple of hours later, his dad died of a massive heart attack. And Chris asked the question, why didn't I answer? And his mentor's response came back, because you didn't know this was going to happen. I'm not trying to be morbid, but we don't always get advance warning that the ones we love are going to leave this world on us. Preston just nodded. He knows. His dad ate breakfast. Life's good. His dad steps out on the porch and sits down in the swing, and in a couple of hours later, he's gone. No warning. That's when we want the phone to ring. That's when we wish we had one more opportunity. So dads and moms, be mentors. Be dads and moms. Seize the moments. Don't let them slip by. Because sooner or later they run out. They either run out because our time runs out as parents, or because our kids get older and wiser and they just quit calling quite as often. They quit showing up quite as much. Kids, make the most of it. If you still have your parents and your grandparents, soak it up. Ask for advice. Spend time with them. And when they want to spend time with you, make room in the calendar. You'll always find time to do the other stuff. But there are some things that once it runs out, there's just no time to go back and make them up. It's true with every meaningful relationship. Now then, I want to make one last connection and I'll close. Elijah and Elisha's separation was in this physical world. Elijah went home. And I have no doubt that when the time came, Elisha went home. But there are times, because of spiritual differences in our conditions, that when that separation comes on earth, it seals that separation eternally. There are those moments when some go home to their father and some are condemned. Make the most of that relationship today to influence the ones that you love, so that that separation does not have to be eternal. Parents, if your kids are lost, reach them. Kids, if your parents are lost, reach them. If your friends are lost, if your siblings are lost, reach them. Because when that dividing moment comes, if we are spiritually separated, there's nothing in the world that can bridge that gap. Make the most of this life. Use it to your advantage to gain the knowledge and the wisdom from those that mean the most to you. But focus even more on that spiritual relationship. If you're subject to the invitation this morning, if you need to mend a relationship, if you need to mend your relationship with the Father, if you need to obey the gospel so that you can have an eternal relationship with those that you love, please come as we stand and sing.